So I'll tell you about how I got into this topic of grit. So in 2005, I was working with a number of different young grad students that were really bright young men, experienced farmers, and they were working on no-till and education programs, cost share programs. Now, this is 19 years ago. And I thought, this is fabulous. I remember the feeling of thinking it'll be just a few years before the entire country is running no-till, amp grazing kinds of operations. And I thought, it's probably going to take more than 2 or 3 years, but maybe by 5 years, everybody will do this. Now, did that happen, y'all? That did not happen, right? So, is agronomic evidence enough to create change? And Dale and I talk in different places and travel around the country, and sometimes we see the same farmer and ranchers showing up to workshops but not getting started yet. Have y'all ever seen that? Or you talk to someone that's almost starting, or somebody goes to a no-till event and we're driving home and we see them on their tractor and they're tilling, right? So that's really been in my head now for 20 years of what else is going on here. So the farmer is the most unpredictable element on the farm. And this concept of grit actually came from West Point. And what they realized was that the cadets that managed to get through the program and succeed were not the ones that had the best grades going in. They weren't the ones that had the best physical fitness. There's something else involved. It's this kind of stick-to-itiveness that became called grit. Right? And so that really is how you manage yourself emotionally, fundamentally, makes the difference in success. So we know this is true for these cadets at West Point. Businesses are often looking at this idea of resilience and grit, and it's very much the case also in farming. So these are a couple of reasons why I think this is really important. One is that if you're able to best manage yourself and develop this grit, you're going to make good decisions. You're going to make more money. Another reason is that we need to get entire communities involved in regenerative ag, because you can actually change your microclimate, but you usually can't do it on one farm alone unless you own a third of the county, which maybe you do, but it's just with enough contiguous miles, we can really change the weather. So that's important. So sometimes it helps for simply changing the weather. It's also nice to get more people involved near you, because then you can share ideas. You know what works here. You can sometimes share equipment, right? And so even if you have grit, knowing why your neighbor might be hesitating is important. Then it's also important for your own happiness, right? To be able to manage yourself emotionally better. And then we are able to politically advocate for ourselves as a group better when we work together. So having more control over the farm bill, over state policy. We have changes coming down the pike. I get very nervous when I see all those protests in Europe. I would like us to have a voice in deciding what happens in the future. And we do better when we can work together. So here's this concept. These are mutually reinforcing. When you have personal resilience, you're more open to greater knowledge and new practices, and that can lead to community resilience, and that leads to ecological resilience. And this is a virtuous circle. So what are the dimensions of grit? I have to switch so I can see my own words. Okay, so it's being growth-oriented. Everybody who is here today is growth-oriented. It's having resilience. That means you get back up. There's nobody in farming and ranching that hasn't had a bad year or a bad couple of years or a bad 5 years or something unexpected. So it's the ability to get back up after difficulty. It's instinct, the ability to trust your gut and to know when your gut is wrong and override your gut. And then tenacity. Come on, click. All right, there we go. And so there's times when something feels wrong emotionally, right? But rationally, we need to do something instead, right? So you're separating out emotion and rationality. So let's talk about what gut feelings are. So a human being in our brain is a lizard or a reptile brain, and then we have a mammal brain and a logical frontal cortex on top of that. And whenever we get stressed, which means something gives us a fight or flight reaction, our lizard brain takes over. The lizard is not very smart. So if you have a bad crop, then the lizard might say, John is not running this farm well. I am now taking over all the decisions because he just scared us, right? Your lizard brain, this gut, takes over and leads you in a direction that the lizard thinks is safe and best, and often it isn't. Okay? Now, we know about a lot of farmer mental health issues, right? We know that farmers are committing suicide at high rates, and that more than half of farmers regularly have anxiety and depression, but it isn't just farmers. So I teach college students. Young people are depressed and anxious at record levels, and even the people that are supposedly benefiting from the system, the wealthiest among us, often feel depressed and anxious, worried that their friends aren't real. One of the ways to think about this is that we have been functioning in social, economic, and agronomic systems for 10,000 years that don't really create systems that promote human happiness. So this is a map that shows desertification. And do you see the Fertile Crescent in Mesopotamia there, and it's all desert, right? So what we've done is, since the Fertile Crescent began, civilizations ruin their soil and then go invade somebody else. Right? So the Roman Empire invades Europe. Is it because they're sassy and mean? Well, maybe they were, but they do it so they can keep growing wheat because they wreck their soil, right? And so that's a big way to think about colonization, empire, is that we have been farming and ranching in ways that wreck the soil and they aren't sustainable. But we're at the end now of having places to go, right, to get more land. And I don't agree with Elon Musk that the moon is a good option, right, for us, right? And our culture has been a culture of more, right? And so how many people in this room have a parent or a grandparent that fought in a war? I do. My granddad in World War I, my dad in Korea, right? How many people have a parent or a grandparent that went through the Dust Bowl? Hands? How many people have a family member that ever went through a really bad drought where you were worrying about bankruptcy, right? Okay, so these are things where we have displacement, we have war, we have traumatic situations over and over again across generations, and it's made us emotionally not our best. So here's a way to look at where we're at now. This shows the loss of topsoil on the upper on that graph right there, you can see.
Set up the time so he can fix the doors going into the main hall. Give me a call back at 8:06.
He's on. All right, all of y'all fix the doors. Okay, so we've lost a lot of topsoil, and there's bets about how many more crops we have left if we don't change our methods, right? And that is a graph of the rise in fertilizer use. So we're kind of at the end of this paradigm, right? And you have heard here from a lot of different producers about new ways to farm and new ways to ranch where you can build topsoil instead of lose topsoil. And you don't have to buy fertilizer. You can grow your own fertilizer, and you can be free of a system that sets the price. And you probably know that most of the people that sell fertilizer on the planet now are not even in the United States. Do you want to be vulnerable, right, to a fertilizer company that sets prices and isn't even an American company? And then this is a way for us to look at progress, right? Is that do we really have progress, or do we need to more broadly think about what we're doing? So from 1900 to 2000, more people died in war than all of human history added together. Is that progress? This shows extinction of species. The one on the upper right shows how much migration we've had. And there's two different cultures that talk about this idea that if you have a war or a really bad famine or a drought, it takes 7 generations to recover from the emotional trauma of that event. So what I'm saying is for 10,000 years, we haven't had a chance to recover. We have been in perpetual stress. And I feel like our agronomic and economic system is set up in a way to perpetuate that type of stress. Does that make sense to everybody? So how do we do it differently? And how do we understand it? So I'm going to break these down, but a trauma is when you have a fight or flight reaction to either a need that's chronically unmet, regularly unmet, or acutely unmet. And I'm going to go through and explain why farmers and ranchers have more of these traumas than most populations. And I'm going to tell you how you can take care of it, like strategies for what you can do, and then how to listen if somebody you know has one of these trauma-driven lizard brain reactions. Okay, so the first one here is a safety risk. I've got to really turn it so I know what I'm saying. So farmers have more safety trauma than any other profession. That means that the core fundamentals of your profession are out of your control, and that is traumatic, folks. That means you cannot control commodity prices, input prices, and rain, right? It's out of your control. That is fundamentally highly stressful. So one of the big reasons for regenerative ag is you get way more of that under your control, right? But you need to know that you are in a profession that's super high stress. So firefighters, surgeons also have high stress. What does that do to you to be in that situation year after year, decade after decade, and maybe generation after generation? It has two big effects. One is it takes that inner lizard and it makes you feel more change and risk averse than other people would be, okay? You're gonna be wanting the familiar because your lizard doesn't want you to take risks. It makes you risk averse. That's about 75% of people, farmers, are gonna be risk averse. The other 25% are risk takers and gamble more than they should. And I mean gamble on the farm or gamble at the casinos. And farmers are actually very well represented at the casinos. Why would that be? Anybody that has this dopamine imbalance, like a safety risk profession, is more likely to gamble, okay? So know that. That means that as a profession, you are at risk to not, you might need to take a risk when it feels wrong, and you might be taking too much risks and not planning carefully. So sometimes people feel like it's better to feel safe with a familiar bad practice than experience risk and fear with a new practice. Now, it's normal if you want to try something and it makes you feel sick. So we worked about 1.5 years ago in New Mexico. And it was nice because our field day was with a rancher who was only a couple of years into his new practice, a rancher farmer. And he told our whole group that he was shaking the first time he drilled a cover crop. That is normal, friends. That's normal. So if something feels wrong, let your logical brain override the lizard that makes you feel like something is too strange and too risky. Familiar feels safe. Somebody asked me, when I was a kid, I lived in dairy country, and they asked if the dairy around me and our dairy was what kind of cattle it was, and I thought, well, of course what kind of cattle do you think we should have? What would you guess? What's the ultimate dairy cattle? That's right. So it's like, well, of course it's Holsteins, and I felt slightly offended because it was like, well, you think it would be that strange Jersey cattle, right? So for me, I don't have skin in the game for beef cattle because I don't have opinions, I don't have a sense of what's normal and safe, and it would always feel weird to me to have different cattle than that because that's not what I grew up with, right? And actually the research shows if you're starting a new dairy, Jersey are probably better or a hybrid mix is better, right? So I can understand it even from within myself. It would just feel like they don't look right, it doesn't feel right, it's not the normal thing. But you have to know that when you have that reaction, you have to override it. And know that having something feel wrong doesn't mean that it is wrong. Okay, so there we go. You would avoid risk, you might never start. And each one of these core needs has a biological chemical that goes with it. So this is dopamine. So again, this is the idea that it's up and down. We tend to take personal satisfaction when we have a really good crop, right? Like, yeah, I did that, yay, even though some of it's out of our control. But conversely, we can feel personal shame when a crop fails, right? So that puts us at risk also for self-esteem. Now, this is a graphic that comes from Australia. I couldn't find one that was from the USA. But what it's telling us is that farmers have the highest number of injuries. Has anybody ever gotten hurt on a farm or ranch in this room? You know, a little bit or a lot, right? And so that also increases this sense of not taking risks. And it seems strange, but this is how the lizard works. So if you have an accident on your farm and it's completely unrelated to a decision, it still can make you physiologically more risk averse. Okay, so farming has by far the most physical injury. It's literally a physical safety risk in addition to a fiscal safety risk. So how do you reduce fear and increase healthy risk-taking and dopamine? So these are suggestions for you if you're going through this, and then listen to your neighbors for some of these kinds of underlying emotional reasons for why they might not start. So one of the things that you can do is to make a done list. Why does that help? Have you ever caught up with every task on your farm or ranch? Anybody ever caught up? Do you always have a perpetual to-do list, right? So what that does is if you're only keeping track of the to-do list, your brain feels like this life is out of control. I'm on this never-ending hamster wheel, and it increases your anxiety, okay? So if each night or every couple of days you make a list of what you got done, it changes your brain and makes your inner lizard feel like it's more under control. Because I promise you, you're getting a lot done. So this is a simple habit. It's training the lizard. It's like dog training. Some of these seem really simple, but I promise you they make a big difference over time. You have to change your orientation. So try that. Make done lists, not just to-do lists. Here's another strategy. It's called Eat That Frog. So there's a book with that title. What that means is that you do the most avoided task first, okay? Because your lizard is saying, don't call the cover crop company. You can call the cover crop people tomorrow. Let's do something else. Have you ever missed a deadline for something and you're kind of kick yourself, right? Tomorrow we can fill out the cost share application. Let's not do that today. You might not even realize it's happening to you, right? Because the lizard controls you, okay? So pick the avoided task. Do it first. Do it first in the week. Do it first in the season. Do it first in the day. For me, it's anything to do with financial bureaucracy. That triggers me like crazy. I would rather muck out the stinkiest grain shed, or bury a carcass of a rotted animal than do something financial related to my farm. Okay? So that means sometimes I might be at risk for missing or bureaucratic, right? I might be at risk of missing a cost share opportunity. So know what it is that you're procrastinating. Do it first. The frog is not related to the lizard. Eat the frog just means eat that unpleasant thing. Get it out of the way. Okay? That's a strategy. And then when you do it, you feel so much better. Have you ever avoided something and then you do it and you're like, wow, now I don't have that to worry about. I feel so much better. Has anybody? You had that? That's what this is. So you get a dopamine hit from getting it done, and then you reduce that anxiety from having it haunt you. Yeah, and Dale, we have to find out if we can get cost share on those ponds, which reminds me, for us. I do it too. Okay, here's another one that is a good strategy. This is a gratitude journal, okay? So things can be crap and stressful. The strategy is over 6 to 7 weeks, you can change your brain and become an optimistic, half-full kind of a person by just writing down 4 to 5 things every day that you're grateful for. Now, it won't change your brain overnight or in a week, but if you do this for 6 to 7 weeks, your brain gets the feeling that life is more good than bad. Again, this is like dog training. It's habituation to give yourself the best resilience that you can. It sounds like a silly practice. I force some of my undergrads to do it. They think it's silly. At the end of the term, they say, wow, I feel so much more optimistic. I go to all my classes. I feel so much happier now. So you do that and your brain thinks, what I'm doing is more good than bad. Okay, so it's a gratitude list. It also is really important to know that you shouldn't worry about worry. So this is a guy in bed and he's pondering, I wonder if I should add radish to my cover crop mix. And the woman says, is he thinking about other women? So that idea of ruminating, has anybody ever laid awake at night and you're worrying about something and you can't sleep? Or you wake up early and you can't sleep? When that happens, start off by knowing it's normal, right? Worriers survived. So if it happens to you, don't let worry you. All the people that were relaxed and non-anxious are dead. They're dead, okay? We are the survivors of the survivors of the survivors. Humans like us have been around for 300,000 to 400,000 years, and the person that was laying there thinking, damn, I think we should close the cave tighter. Seriously, right? They got up and they did it, and they survived. All those chill hunter-gatherers, or Stone Age people, they didn't survive, okay? Now, so that's tough for us, right? Because we're wired to hold on to worry. So that means any worry loop that we've ever created, think of it like software, any one that we've ever created, it's always with us. But what we can do is we can create a different track, a different channel. We can switch it. Notice you're worrying and consciously make yourself think of your done list, your gratitude list. Switch your software. So another thing that helps with this is to have a mission statement. This is a mission statement from a sod farm that we visited. They list the 5 principles of soil health. And when you see it, it's motivating, right? What am I doing? Put it out there and visually see it. 75% of our sensory apparatus is visual. So use your eyes to help improve your optimism, your grit, and even your mood. This is a vision board. This is a woman that grows vegetables and flowers. And if you see your vision board every day, that lizard brain believes in what it sees. That's why people do this. It seems like one of those touchy-feely strategies, but it's helpful. So make a vision board of your ideal farm or ranch. If you see it every day, you just put it somewhere in your house where you see it. It makes your brain more optimistic. It makes your brain believe that this is our reality, and it helps your subconscious get you there. Take pictures of the work that you're doing, because when you're transitioning to no-till, cover crops, amp grazing, there are a lot of changes, and you might forget where you started. So take pictures of what you're doing so that you can motivate yourself with the before-after. It's important. You can also show it to, your friends, so you can have other people see it. Again, it's visual. Keep evidence of the work that you're doing. So here's another one. Most Americans have some kind of a esteem and shame injury. Having self-esteem is a core need. And if you don't have it, you can have a fight or flight reaction. So a lot of people can feel like you're being scolded, right? That this conference might be scolding. Was I a bad farmer before? So everybody needs to give themselves permission to say, look, everybody tilled, right? Everybody did. There's certain practices that are commonplace, and nobody personally needs to feel bad about what they don't know yet, right? So that's important. Now, farmers have an especially challenging time sometimes with esteem because our culture does not praise and value farmers the way the culture should. And this is something that perpetually drives me crazy. And so is there any other profession where we would make a joke like this? Have you seen this? You know, what is a farmer? Farmers are just some dumb hick. That's out there. You're allowed to make fun of rural people. You're allowed to make fun of farmers. That means that farmers emotionally don't necessarily walk through their day or week feeling valued the way you might if you're a doctor or a lawyer or even a teacher. Do you agree with me? If you're a teacher, you know, or a lawyer, people think, wow, they're smart. If you say I'm a farmer, does everybody say, wow, you must know a lot. You're doing something important. Do you see the difference? Yeah, most farmers are really smart, really hardworking, doing incredibly valuable work, but the culture does not have our backs. There's also the sense that, especially if you come from if you're Mexican or you're Asian, or you're African American, that you're doing this kind of, you know, slave work, that it's culturally bad. And it's not unusual for people to come from families that have encouraged kids to get off the farm, right? Go do something more valuable. Has anybody ever heard that, or one of your relatives? You know, that they're not necessarily all encouraging their kids to follow in their footsteps because it's not valued and it's high stress. So this is from The Onion. It's a satire. It's Nancy Pelosi, who's next to her there. Okay, and it's a joke saying, listen up, hayseeds. You know, and I can't even read it because of my angle here. But essentially, it's a joke about them talking down to rural people. And The Onion is a satirical newspaper, but it's funny because it has some element of truth to it. So Michael Bloomberg made a comment that anybody could be a farmer. You just throw a seed in the ground and that's all you have to do. Doesn't require brains like being in a tech field. Okay? So there's a reason that as farmers and ranchers, we can have our backup and not want someone to tell us what to do, we will have more of an esteem threat, right? I don't want to be made to feel bad about what I'm doing. The culture is already doing their job for me, that job for me. Here's another element. My husband, Mr. Strickler over there, first drove a tractor by himself, a 56 International, when he was 9 years old. Okay, and his dad didn't tell him how the brakes worked. Okay, so what are the implications of this? And what does this have to do with transitions or self-esteem? So for a lot of farm kids, you're valued not for who you are, but for the work you do. There's always work to be done, okay? And it's called an authoritarian parenting style. So we often feel like we're most valued simply when we're in motion, right? The more work we do, the more valuable we are. Not just we're okay because we exist, right? And so that just means that as farmers and ranchers, if we grow up in that kind of a culture, we're more protective of criticism, right, than somebody that didn't have that parenting style, right? And we want to be praised for what we're already doing. Okay, so sometimes it can feel like it's better to be good at a bad practice than bad at a good practice. Okay? Just keep that in mind for the reasons that we've just gone through. And again, normalcy, it comes in there too, right? You have a sense of, like, sometimes really high crop litter. Your brain might say, wow, that looks so sloppy, right? Like a neat farm is the value, right? You have to interfere with your brain that what feels normal isn't always what is the best thing. All right, so what are some strategies to build esteem and reduce shame and increase serotonin? This is a really big one. So a lot of us have this inner voice criticizing us. Notice if you have it, okay? Oh man, you screwed that up again. Oh, you skipped a row. That field looks terrible. Oh, you better get up and go do that. Can you relate to this inner voice criticizing you? Anybody have one? Okay, so notice if you have it running on repeat. It's very common. And then stop it. Stop your own inner voice. Most of us speak worse to ourselves than anybody else will speak to us. Okay? Speak to yourself the way that you would speak to a friend. and cultivate a kinder inner voice to yourself. This is a habit. It takes weeks and weeks to turn it around. And I thought I didn't have one at all, and then I realized, oh man, this is my entire personality. And that's why I have 2 PhDs. It's like, I gotta keep going, So I'm always, and my inner voice calls me Betsy, because my Miss Betsy is what my grandmother used to call me. I'm like, oh, Betsy, you lost your keys again. Oh, Betsy, look at that cost share paperwork, right? It's constantly criticizing me. What that means is that inner voice means that it's harder for me to take healthy risks because I'm always telling myself I'm a bad person. It's really common in the culture, okay? So notice it, stop it, give yourself inner praise, okay? These are little funny strategies, but they have a big effect on anxiety, depression, optimism. So you can draw a picture of what the one voice says, draw a picture of what the other voice says, so that you can start to turn this around. It's going to be hard to make a change. It's hard to farm through drought, right? We're in tough times here. You need every emotional strategy to help you. The people that do the best are the people with emotional grit. They're not the smartest. They haven't inherited the most land. They're not the people with the best equipment or the best degrees. The most successful ranchers and farmers have emotional resilience. And these little strategies can help you get it and maintain it. This is really important too. We all have a need to have belonging and friends. If all the guys at the coffee shop are saying that you're farming or ranching weird, it makes it hard. You don't want to feel like you're the outlier. But right here, this is a community, right? And for a lot of us in rural communities, like I live in Kansas, and there's town after town that's emptied out. It is depressing, right? It's harder to get a good sense of friendship and community in a lot of rural America because after Earl Butz with Get Big and Get Out, a lot of people did get out, right? So it's very important to have friends. And it's important to have friends that are doing the kind of work that you're doing. They don't always have to be the next farm over, but you're going to find people in your county and make a point of looking for those folks. So this is actually Gail Fuller's place at a field day in Kansas, right? Doesn't that look like fun? Yeah, it's very important. Don't neglect that, right? So this is a journey for Michael Thompson. He was in that film that Peter Bick was talking about, Carbon Cowboys. And he started off just making his own transition. It took another 4 years for his whole family to get on board. And then now he helps lead No-Till on the Plains. He started the Kansas Soil Health Alliance. He brings dozens of producers in. So you want to go from me to we. We are primates. We are social creatures. You need to do this with other people. Now the last one is justice. Do you see the guy there saying the farm bill is coming and he's got his sword at ready? Has there ever been a policy that's been bad for farmers and ranchers? Has there? Have they all been completely fair? What do you think? I think there's a lot of terrible policy, right? So farmers and ranchers should have what we would call like a justice injury, because so many things have not gone in our favor, right? So I've got there like the loss of the family farm crisis of the 80s. I was working in Indiana during the hog crisis. That was absolutely disastrous. Many, many farms were lost. So people can have anger, and it can be something that's individual at a couple of groups of people, or just feeling like the whole system is bad. So I'm going to give you 3 strategies to deal with anger. The 2 things are you're apathetic, you just give up and you don't care, or you're volatile, okay? So one is to habitually reflect on your purpose, your why. This is a little strategy for a particular person that makes you angry, is to imagine them as a baby. Nobody gets mad at a baby who bites you or says you're a poopy head or whatever, because they're just a baby. So if you think of that particular person that makes you mad, imagine them as a toddler in diapers. If it really gets to you, print out a picture of them, print out a picture of a toddler in diapers and paste their face over it. And then it'll be hard to stay mad. Another one is if there's a particular person or a group that makes you mad, a situation, is to do something while you think of that that's really physically hard. Okay? So somebody cheated you out of a deal on some land. You know, you ruminate about it. Think of that while you're lifting weights. Okay? Or while you're briefly running hard. Why would that possibly make sense? Is because the lizard says, all right, we're fighting Frank right now, and he's winning. We're fighting Frank, and he's winning. Your lizard brain thinks you're perpetually threatened by it. So if you add a little physicality to it, the lizard says, I don't need to torture this person anymore because they can kick his ass. Okay? Right? It's really, because it's a threat. It's anger. So you bring something physical, even if it has no physicality to the threat at all. These are two little strategies. But what do you do about widespread injustice? What you do about widespread injustice is to get involved in trying to make change, okay, in some sort of way. And that makes life better. So I want everybody to think for a minute about the word power. Tell me what you associate with the word power. What words do you associate with it? Strength? What else? Money? Confidence? What else? Who has power? What words go with the people that have power? What? Control? Pardon? Position? People that have position? Right? So a lot of people in our culture, we associate power as being something outside of us, okay? So it's money, it's politicians, it's billionaires, it's, guns, muscles. So think of a time now where you felt personally empowered. What were you doing when you felt empowered? Does everybody have one thing in mind right now? I want you to think of one vignette. All right, so these are the things that people tend to say when you're personally empowered. You have that feeling of, yeah, that's it, right? That good feeling. So my crop was amazing. My kid did something great. I stood up for myself. I did something I was afraid to do. I helped my neighbor. This is our real experience with power. So we have to change our brain about what power is because we are not powerless. And this is what actually makes us feel powerful, right? So we want to remember what real power is. Whoops. Back. Oh, I did it. I have to do the magical way to make it go back. Okay. All right, so we have to reimagine what power is for ourselves and do those things. Notice when we actually are empowered because we do have a lot of power. Okay? So when we associate it with outside of ourselves, then we don't always take action. One of the worst feelings that we can have as producers is that you can't fight City Hall, that we are victim to policy, that we're victim to the weather, okay? Because we can make changes that make a big difference. And we can change policy too, right? You can change City Hall. All of the best things that ever changed in our country are because people fought back against some kind of external authority. So this is Margaret Mead's quote, "Never doubt that a small group of citizens working together can change the world. Indeed, that's all that ever has." So we can change our local climate, we can change policies, we can have better lives. So these are these different sources of power. So state and national power, how do we have that? How do we have knowledge power? Right here, you're learning knowledge is one source of power. How do we manage our own brains to be personally empowered? And all of these types of power together, they meet our needs for safety, esteem, belonging, and justice. Now this is from Forbes, that we're going to have some kind of transhuman future, and we're all going to imprint, we're going to make phones into our brains. That's not my idea of the future. My idea of the future is healthy communities, healthy farms, right? So let's go back now to happiness. What actually makes human beings happy? So often people think more money, more money, more money makes you happy. That's not true. What makes you happy is just enough money so that you don't have anxiety and you can pay your bills. So when people win the lottery or they get some big extra money, they're happier for 3 to 4 months, maybe 6 months, and then they reset to their normal amount. Now, you do need to have an absence of anxiety. So that's where, if we can run our farms in ways that are more stable and predictable, that promotes happiness, right? So we need to have enough money to pay the bills regularly and avoid anxiety. So if your farming operation feels like it's a gamble and you don't change your practice and you just get more acres, you're just gambling more money, right? But if you change your practice in ways that it's more under your control, nitrogen is grown in your land instead of having to play the commodity price gamble for nitrogen, right? Those kinds of things, and it increases your sense of safety, having enough. That's a really big need. Not just lots of money, but enough money to prevent anxiety. Another big need that we all have is competence, that we have meaningful work, right? Now, when you get involved in regenerative ag, there's stuff to learn. It's an esteem risk to become a student again and learn stuff. But if you're learning with others, then you get to make new friends, right? And when you see your farm get better and better, healthier and healthier, the soil gets healthier instead of more and more degraded, that feels great. A lot of people that start the regenerative journey say, wow, farming is fun again. Ranching is fun again. It's nice to see it becoming healthier and healthier. It does take more learning, right? You're going to have to learn certain things. But when you learn it and you put it into practice, that's a dopamine hit. That feels good, right? It's meaningful work. I want to leave my farm to my kids. I want them to have stability in the future, right? I want to make my farm healthier and healthier, better and better, so they have a safe place to be if they ever want or need to be there, right? So the better I can make it, that makes me feel good too. So making it better then also connects to connection, to family and friends. So we need to have relationships. When you get involved in regenerative ag, you're joining a new community. It's fun to talk about ideas. You're here, make sure before you leave, you get at least 2 or 3 people's phone numbers and you stay in touch with whatever it is that you want to do on your farm or ranch next. It's better to do it together. That's a human need. We're primates. We evolved in, social communities that supported us. And then justice, right? We want to have a social, civic, and political system that enables the above, right? And then that's it. That's what happiness is. So we are right now in a situation where we are connected to each other agronomically. And Peter Bick spoke about this too. Another reason our work matters is that we can pull carbon out of the atmosphere and put it into the land. Collectively, farmers can completely reverse global warming. We have about 40% of weather is local. Dale and I are going to talk about that and how that works. So you can work together and make rain slower, steadier, more frequent, and simply make more rain. So in the Chihuahua Desert, Alejandro Correo and those folks over 20 years, they actually get about 20% more rain. And if you're in a place that only gets 10 inches and you can get 2 more inches, that's a very big deal. And it isn't just more rain, it's slower and steadier, right? So when we work in regenerative ag, we can stabilize the microclimate and the local weather. And we can even literally reverse climate change. And this is the numbers. In the US and globally, about half of the land is run by farmers. Now I'm from Kansas, where it's 87.5% of the land is farms or ranches. So we have the power to do this, folks. And then the other number is, I can't see it, but a lot of the other land is run by conservationists who run a state park, a federal park, a community park. So deliberately build support for yourself with the same attention that you would give to growing a garden or growing your soil or growing your farm. The farm starts with you. You're the biggest variable. Nurture your spirit. Take care of your emotional ecology. Help your community in comprehensive ecological economic, and social regeneration. Our community is our soil. We want to nurture our own personal soil, and we want to nurture the community around us because we are social creatures. So everywhere we go, we see hope, beauty, we see all sorts of great things happening. The mass media will tell you otherwise, but Americans mostly get along and are doing really cool stuff on their farms and in their communities. And then we make this virtuous circle. It starts with us, it goes to our community, it goes to our farm, and it goes to our entire ecology. And it is happening. We are doing it right now. So be the change, fight the fight. Farmers can literally save the world. That's the end.
This talk was very interesting. So one thing kept popping into my mind. I farmed for 50 years. What was my driving force was adrenaline. If I was planning, my adrenaline would start. And when I got that job done, I'd be lifeless for a day. Same way during harvest. That adrenaline got me going. It was, you couldn't stop us, you know. We're going to get the job done.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of harvest, sometimes I might do nothing for 2 to 3 days.
Yeah, I'm still mic'd up. Well, that's, a lot of us do that. You know, we go on, this is the current emergency, and it does give us adrenaline and it gives us dopamine. The problem with that is that when you flip out of that and you're not in the middle of it, you can get depressed, right? Because you're telling your brain that the main happiness chemical you're feeding it is dopamine and adrenaline. What are the other happiness chemicals? Oxytocin is the happiness chemical of friendship and brotherly love, okay? Serotonin is the happiness chemical of working with a group. They're different, right? Dopamine can also be getting little things done. So lots of times Olympic athletes, have you heard of this, everybody? They get really depressed after they finish all their medals. You know, so like Michael Phelps was suicidal. That's really common. Because when you have a narrow way that you get any of your happiness, instead of balancing out those happiness chemicals, boy, oh boy, are you at risk if that goes away, right? So they're also just like, they're going for the next carrot in front of you. So that's where, if you train yourself not to just think of what's the next job, but my big picture, that can help protect you from that cycle. Because most of us feel like our lives are just, well, real life is going to happen after, you know, I buy that extra quarter. Real life is going to happen when I remodel my house. Real life is going to happen when I get a certain amount in the bank. And it starts when we're kids. Real life is going to happen after college. Real life is going to happen later. Can you relate to that? You know, that it's always in front of you. So if you consciously let yourself enjoy the present and you think about the big picture, then you can prevent that idea of future and adrenaline as your main source of motivation. Does that make sense? Another question back there?
One of the things that happened in the last life is just going off the grid, the injustices in the world that we can't do anything about. How do you address that?
Well, I think we can do a lot about it, right? And I think one of the worst things that we get from the corporate cartel-owned media is that we can't fight City Hall and that we can't do something about it. Actually, Americans are not that far apart from each other on what people want in terms of, you know, health or, you know, fair wages or any of that. Americans are actually pretty close. And what we want as Americans is very different from what, you know, Washington is doing. So we do have the power to change it. And it's very important, I think, at this juncture in history that we take the power, that we show up with each other, and that we have a voice, right? Because the worst thing is if you feel like we can't fight them. Of course we can, right? That's the big secret, is that anything that's ever happened that's progressive or helpful or useful in the farming and ranching community or really in the country has been people up, right? Power accedes nothing without a struggle, but we have to fight back, right? Non-violently. Collectively, happily. preferably non-violently. Now they have me on their list again. Yeah, we can fight back. And you feel better about it when you try, right? I mean, it's better to go down trying, right? You feel better about it. It'll keep you, that's why we do this, so we can take back our communities. Yes?
Yeah, I just want to make a comment on that. There was just in the past couple of weeks, there was a border bill that was not for the American people. And we fought back. I called my senator, I called my congressman, and we got it stopped.
That's right.
And, that if enough of us do that, it'll.
Right. And you can't, there's something called client mentality that our society instills in us. It's like, well, I think that bill's wrong. I agree with you. I thought it was a terrible bill, right? But somebody else is going to take care of it, right? Somebody else will do it. We are the somebody else. We have to do it, right? And you have to know that feeling of helplessness serves other people's interests and not our own. It really does. So we have the power if we take the power, for sure. Yeah, the worst thing is to feel like you can't fight City Hall, because absolutely you can. Another question? Back here?
Thanks for the presentation. Do you have a YouTube channel or Twitter following?
There's more about this on regenerativewisdom.com, which is our ag consulting group. And I can also send you this PowerPoint. In 2 days, I'm doing a presentation, a podcast with Colorado NRCS on this that everyone's invited to. So we can send you out these things. And there's links to articles that review the theory, because I realize that's a lot in a short amount of time. And I have a short article that I did for the Kansas Rural Center that kind of reviews what some of these strategies are. They seem like they're fluffy and small, but they add up, right? So we have to cultivate our own spirit as the starting place. And there's specific, I call them dog training methods, because they kind of are. We are creatures of habit. We can teach ourselves optimism and resilience over time. Yeah, so absolutely look on our website, send us emails. And I'll give a plug to what Dale and I are doing in the afternoon. We're talking about drought. So one of the reasons is if you want a neighbor to get on board, a lot of times it's one of these sort of emotional underpinnings. Like, we have family members that are in different places agronomically, and it's not that they don't know. So oftentimes it's that, somebody might feel like, well, that's what my brother does, and I want to carve out my space and do something different, right? Because when you can get at least 70% of producers in about 5 square miles, creating a more robust ecosystem with more vegetation and more soil moisture, you can start to change the microclimate, right? And that takes a group of people working together. Our best path to drought is to work together and heal our microclimate and bring more rain. And when you can bring between like 12 and 20% of rain, it doesn't sound like much, but what's 20% more rain here? How many inches is that going to be?
3.6.
Yeah, 3.6. Anybody want 3.6 more inches? Or even 2 inches? And then also having better vegetation and soil moisture, it creates the kind of rain that's driven by what we call biogenic aerosols. And it's warmer, it's slower and steadier. It's that gentle rain. It's not that big dumping rain. The dumping rain comes from a cloud with a lot of dust in it. So we'll talk about how we can manage your farm for the water cycle and the parts of it that are fully in your control and the parts that are regional microclimate. So in Oklahoma, north central Oklahoma, which is Kay County, Tom Cannon has a farm and a ranch there, and those guys have been doing no-till and regenerative practice for about 25 years. And I looked at their water in the county, how much rain they got after this whole group of people started. So they've definitely got 70% there, right? Because they have a lot of local leadership. And they have about 12 to 13% more rain since the county became heavy adopters of no-till and amp grazing compared to the 20 years before. Now, there could be some other reason, but these are things that are studied in really dry places. You can have that happen. And 12% matters, 20% matters, and having those slower, steadier rains matter, and that means coming together as a group to do this, to restore ecosystem functioning. So that is my advertisement for our water talk.